How to cut a ham elegantly, easily, and to its fullest advantage. I've seen loads of tutorials on how to cut a ham. Most of them are incoherent and complicated, completely forgettable, and unclear on how to get every last bit. So when I find myself standing and staring at a ham, the uncertainty gets the best of me. With a little help from my friends at Monte Nevado, I decided to clear things up once and for all. No more doubts. You are going to learn how to cut a ham like a superhero, as if you had X-ray vision to know exactly where the bones are and to make sure you don't run into any trouble in the process. We're going to learn with Raquel, the total expert. And with me, I'll be taking on the role of the dummy, so that whatever I don't understand the first time around, she can just repeat as many times as needed. We're going to cut an acorn-fed 100% Monte Nevado ham that was cured for 4 years. We have to extract every last bit of this miracle that spent months roaming about the montanera pastures and 4 years curing in the breezy mountain rain. And true to the Monte Nevado slogan, it arrives at our table at its moment of perfection, because each ham is looked after and cared for individually. To begin, let's make sure we have the right tools. A big, strong, serrated knife, a short-pointed or paring knife, a sharpening steel to straighten the tip of the knife, a ham knife, and if you want, but we'll be using one, tongs. Make sure not to cut the ham while it is still cold. The ideal temperature is 25 degrees so that you can fully appreciate the aromas. We place the ham in the ham holder with the hoof pointing upward. The first thing we have to do is de-rind the ham. Remove the tough part of the skin. The ham starts off like this and has to end up like this. Can you see it okay? Let's do it again. We use the strong serrated knife because the skin here is really tough. At a distance of 2 fingers, there's a little bone that juts out near the hoof. By the way, never place your hand in front of the knife because we use a lot of force here, so be careful. We start by making a deep oblique cut until we hit the tibia, just like that. Now we're going to trim the external layer of fat from the ham until we get to the marbled part. You want to cut off just enough for what you will be consuming shortly. The air will dry out the exposed ham, so it's best to trim the external layer of fat according to what you'll be consuming. If you're a butcher or a restaurateur and plan on consuming the entire ham in one day, you can trim all the external fat for easier slicing. It should look like this. We'll set aside some slices of the fat to cover the cut when we're done. When we get to this pink part, we'll start to slice. Go ahead and try the first slice. The one doing all the work should have at least some perks. Let's continue slicing parallel to the axis of the ham. This is how it should look. See it? Just keep slicing parallel to the axis of the ham and you should end up with a full slice from one end to the other. Don't worry if you're a bit off, you can fix it as you keep slicing. Just keep slicing these delicious slices off the top that combine both fat and meat. Before we move on, use your X-ray vision. Can you see it? You're going to run into some bones. When a few centimeters of the hip bone begin to appear, take the paring knife and cut around the bone to separate it from the meat. You'll have to do this a few times as you're slicing. We continue cutting, and when we get to the hip bone, you'll see how the slice comes off easily when we get to that cut around the bone. If we hadn't done this, the slice would be shaped like the typical hull of a ship and not straight, which is what happens with bad ham cutters. Remember to sharpen the blade of the ham knife every once in a while so that the slices can be thinly cut and the knife can glide smoothly on a level surface. It's best to cut the slices that are not very thick and about 3 to 4 centimeters long. Place them on a lovely plate to make it easier to appreciate the effort you've made. We'll use the tongs to place the slices on the plate. Continue slicing and, see? The hip bone will be left bare. Taste these slices from this part. Delicious! Each part of the ham has its own unique taste. You should always make a single level cut. Can you see how you can make the most of a cut when it's smooth and level? A single layer from top to bottom. When we've removed a lot of slices, this other long bone will appear, the femur. Don't try to cut the ham on the sides of this bone. Now is when you need to turn the ham over and start cutting the rump. That will make it easier. We'll start by de-rinding this other side. We'll use the strong serrated knife. We start off like this, and we'll de-rind until it looks like this. See it? We extend the cut that we had made at the beginning. We peel off the external layer of fat until we see a nice clean ham ready to slice. Only peel off the bit you're going to consume. We start cutting and look. Try these cuts off the top of the rump and you'll notice how different it tastes from the other side. Each ham has a world of flavors with regions that have their own distinct personalities. Continue slicing, and when you see the tip of the hip bone, use the short, pointed paring knife. Cut around it to separate it from the meat. Then start cutting and slicing this region. Remove the slices just like this. When you finish cutting the rump, in parallel to the flank, leaving a thickness of about 2 to 3 centimeters, we rotate the ham, leaving the fat side facing upward to begin what we call the third cut. With the third cut, we want to really optimize the ham. Cut as close to the bone as possible, cutting first around the bone to obtain perfectly sized slices. After rotating the ham, the first thing we want to do is cut around the end of the underside of the hip bone, as close to the bone as possible. We'll be making an almost vertical cut to get 2 smaller slices, because 1 long slice would be too big. We continue cutting until we can see the end of the femur. Once again, we'll cut around the bone just below the lean muscle that we'll cut, getting as close as possible to the femur. From here on, we'll cut vertically. Individual slices, the perfect size for a single serving. Having cut around the bone, the slices are easily removed, and we let practically nothing go to waste. We can consider this third part of the cut done, and now we get to the hind shank of the ham, where we can no longer obtain presentable slices and run into the bone. To finish, we'll continue slicing like before until we get to the hind shank of the ham, and when we finish, we'll move on to the shank. After this, we'll rotate the ham 180 degrees, but this time on the lean side. We have to go through the same motions. We must cut horizontally and cut around the bone from below the lean muscle to obtain clean individual cuts without leaving anything on the bone. Now it's important that on this side of the third cut we slice as thinly as possible, since this part is more cured and harder, since there is no fat content. We want to optimize the part called the shank, since it has a special flavor which is very different from the other areas. Cut against the cut we made along the leg. Continue slicing until you find that thin bone, the fibula. Once you locate it, use the knife to cut underneath, then pull back on the bone until it snaps off. Set it aside, and now you can take advantage of the meat underneath. Slice as much as you can and then cut out small cubes that you can use for cooking. And there you are. You have used up the entire Monte Nevado acorn-fed 100% Iberico ham as it should be. The only thing left are the bones, which you can use to add a nice taste to your stews. Cut area with slices of the fat, which were set aside as we were derinding the meat. Then we wrap the whole piece with a plastic wrap or a clean cloth. So now you're an expert ham cutter. Don't worry, you'll get better with practice. And if you forget something, you can always come back to this tutorial and watch it again with those superhero X-ray eyes.